Good morning. I find something very powerful and relevant about that song written 48 years ago. As the train carries people along, the settings change, daylight comes and goes, and in the end, changes to the institution of rail travel take center stage. Now there are echoes of change in our church, and I think it's a good time to reflect on the journeys each of us has taken to get to this point. Before I go any further, I'd like to thank two people who had a huge impact on the quality of this sermon, for better, for sure. First is Kathleen Ellis, my spiritual director, and also Charlie Wellman. And both of them are in trouble because I may be leaning on them again anytime I have a writing assignment. Great gratitude to both of them. My name is Ken Ripperger-Suhler. I'm a new member of Wildflower Church, and my pronouns are he, him, and his. I welcome whoever is listening and or watching this sermon on your personal journey. I hope you'll find that Wildflower is a welcoming place, regardless of your appearance, identity, orientation, experiences, and current emotional state. A place where you can find comfort, inspiration, and a sense of acceptance and support from the people around you. At times, you may also find it to be a place with the challenges and stresses associated with human response to change. Like life in general, Wildflower is all of those things. Please take your brain, heart, and soul with you on the bus for our journey today. If you choose to be fully present, you'll visit your spiritual journey, your life as a social activist, and your journey with Wildflower Church. This time, we'll light the chalice.
Please join me in the chalice lighting words that are on your screen. I'm going to use Sarah's wonderful hand chalice even before she gets here. So you're welcome to join me. We'll make a chalice with our hands. With the kindling of this flame, we affirm our commitment to accept life's gifts with grace and gratitude and use them to bless the world in the spirit of love.
Good morning. My name is Adam Hegemeyer. I am the recently elected president of the Wildflower Board of Trustees. And now it's time for Community Matters, right? I know. Where we focus on our mission. Words are escaping me all the time right now.
Growing
spiritually together, spreading love, justice, and joy. So first thing is the board did elect officers. So I am president. Susie Epstein is vice president. Melita is secretary, and Paula is treasurer. Exciting. The White Affinity Group teaches today at 1:30 p.m. In August, the White identifying members of the team for anti-racism, anti-oppression, and multiculturalism is planning to launch an affinity group series for people who identify as white. This teaching will provide an opportunity to examine the language used in anti-racist work and understand the origin of whiteness and its impact on how our U.S. systems have been formed. This teaching and the White Affinity groups are one way we can begin to build a supportive culture here at Wildflower, where it is okay to talk about our experiences together and what being a white anti-racist might look like. Dee will put the link to the meeting in the chat, so you can have it for following this at 1:30. And if you have not registered, you may, of course, still attend. Other matter is, the facilities and safety team needs you. After a number of years chairing the team, Alan Fisher is relinquishing the role. Alan has been an amazing steward of our leased space and has been instrumental in building good relationships with Faith through the space sharing with them, space sharing team. Alan, thank you. We're grateful, and you've done a lot for Wildflower. This does leave an important gap for how our church functioning. The board needs you, someone, one of you, many of you, to help us meet our facilities needs. We have immediate needs to clean and paint the minister's office. And when we return to any on-campus activities, we'll also need protocols for using facilities and supporting their use and safety. Alan will support the new volunteers in this transition, and if you're interested, you can email me. Dee will put the email address in the chat. That's it.
I'm going to return back to the flow of the city of New Orleans. I like to travel. I'm traveling right now. I'm in New Mexico. And I think the city of New Orleans is to some extent about traveling. I like metaphors too, and have been known to mix them mercilessly. So bear with me as we get on board my favorite metaphor, the bus ride. I will be your driver today as we explore 3 different aspects of the bus ride that it seems Wildflower Church and we as individuals, members, are currently on. This ride could be a bit bumpy in the grammatical, emotional, and maybe even physical senses. As I said before, I love to travel. Maybe it's because my family took vacations in the summer and they were such positive experiences. New sights, new places to eat familiar and not so familiar foods. We spent 2 weeks of my father's vacation, not in San Antonio where I grew up, but in a different place and usually in the outdoors. These were important formative times for me because they shaped my expectations of what my life should be like. Hard work followed by reward, a treat well earned, kind of like ice cream after way too many bites of broccoli or spinach, or what's more dreadful, that stuff that looks like a bunch of little cabbages. I won't speak the name here. My journey through life has matched my expectations, except for not becoming an ex-Mickey Mantle, Bill Russell, or Rod Laver. I started working at age 12, mowing yards in my North San Antonio neighborhood. When I was 14, I began working weekends in a tennis shop at Oak Hills Country Club, where I earned money for tennis lessons and equipment. When I was 16, I planned a trip around the southern US so I could play tennis on clay courts, which were hard to find in San Antonio. I got my $99 travel pass from Greyhound and was on the road for a month. And I would stay for free as I went from town to town playing these tournaments, staying with people that offered their homes to the youth who were playing in the tournaments. I was more than a little proud of myself for figuring out how to make things happen in my life. And to this day, I think that it is very important to believe you can make things happen. And I hope that you will find, as I still believe, that you can make things happen for yourself and for those around you. Believing that you have some control over life events is a very empowering feeling, perhaps even a little bit intoxicating and possibly a source of blindness. And we'll return to that point later. While you have some control over life events, it is not total. And you may find in those moments in which you experience less control that having a person or a congregation to hug and to be hugged by is a very good thing. I hope that you can have some sense of that feeling today. Let's take a minute to look around the Zoom gallery of faces and think about what we see. Do you see people who look anxious, curious, sleepy, sad, or happy? Wave to people you know. Wave to people you don't know. It's pretty darn hard to shake hands as we normally would, but do your best. Promise yourself now to find an old friend and meet a new friend next time we're together physically. Love and loneliness can both be infectious, along with our favorite, COVID. So now it's time to take a look at the bus, and it's time for everybody to get on board. Our next stop is your spiritual journey. To help empower you in the belief that you can make sense of today's service, take a minute to get a piece of paper and something to draw or write on. This is going to proceed like one of my college lectures would, to some extent, hopefully more entertaining with music. But you may find it useful to make a map as we roll along. And now you can take a look at my map on the next slide and get a sense of what I did. This is kind of a little bit of where we're headed. So you can see the 3 branches there. And we'll follow each of those branches today. And hopefully the color coding makes things a little more sensible. I trust most people are armed. Now I'm not seeing everyone, so when I used to teach in the classroom, I could see if everybody had their paper and pencil and they were ready to go. So I'm gonna just trust you've got it if you want it. Oh, look at that, woo! So, Evans Curry was my thesis director at Texas Tech, and he liked to describe teaching as being like the work of a tour guide. My favorite spiritual tour guide is Pete Seeger. I learned to appreciate Pete through an album he made in the 1980s as a way to raise money for a friend who was suffering from diabetes. He recorded My Life Flows On, an Endless Song, on that album, and I've loved it ever since. May you feel the support of those gathered here around you today as we look at each other, eyes wide open. Please rise and body your spirit if you feel the need, and sing as if no one is listening, because I promise to you that they are not. You'll find this is hymn number 108 if you have a hymnal in your house, and if not, you're going to find the words that appear on the screen.
My life flows on.
Indeed, how can we keep from singing? Whether we're joyful or struggling with all our heart and soul against depression, like Maya Angelou's Caged Bird. How can we keep from singing? Let it out. Feel your feelings and don't hide them. The first leg of our journey has been an unfolding mystery to me for a long time. Like most kids, I felt a visceral connection to the world around me before I had words for my experience. But once I had words, look out. I ran them around in my head, trying to get the right combination to convey exactly the meaning I wanted. This is kind of hard when you're not sure what you mean, and for many of us, that defines adolescence. You have a lot of feelings, you're not sure what they mean or what to do with them. But I knew I was an atheist when I was an adolescent. I knew that because what the God-talking people around me were saying made no sense at all. Virgin birth, 6 days to create the world. I grew up in an engineer's house. Really? I didn't know how much about geology or sex or reproduction until late into my adolescence. I mean, very late. But what I did know didn't jive with that. So I came to distrust God-talking people who seemed to be everywhere in my youth in my South Texas cultural world. So this conflicted mixture of visceral connection to the natural world and sense of revulsion to what I understood as the false basis of the religious world was my first stop on my spiritual journey, even if I didn't really know it then. So take a minute now to write down one or more words or draw a picture that describe your first stop on your spiritual journey. If it doesn't come to you right away, just make a note. You'll do this later in the privacy of your own home. Something we used to think about before COVID. Maybe you'll just call someone and have a chat about your spiritual journey, or whenever the Spirit moves you. That was a pun. So, hopefully you've got something of a start written down on your paper, or a note made to remind you how to get back to it at a later time. This doesn't all have to be completed in 1 hour. It's quite a trip. My next stop on the spiritual journey is my entry into the First UU Church of Austin. Really? A church? My ex-wife had experienced a lot of joy from singing with church choirs as a young person, and she felt the need to reconnect with her musical experience. So into the First UU Church of Austin we marched, she much more purposeful than I, although neither of us was a believer. Lo and behold, I found a spiritual home. I didn't have to believe all that mumbo jumbo that made my head spin. Maybe this religion stuff had some value. In fact, I got so comfortable that I drifted away from my atheism into a more comfortable agnosticism. As a scientist, I didn't have evidence at all on either side of the question, so there I was. But what's crazier, within 2 years, I decided that I would follow in the footsteps of the interim minister who helped heal the UU Church in Lubbock that had been struggling and had been wounded by a painful ministerial experience. I knew that I needed to grow up a bit more before I did that because I just finished struggling in my work as a high school biology teacher out in Elgin, and a very strong suspicion that the kids I had taught were going to grow up into people I might meet in a congregation someday. This very scary thought motivated me to wait until my psychological strength was up to the task. And my 23 years of parenting had just begun, and I believed and hoped that I would be more of a grown-up when I had mastered parenting, should I ever master it. So time passed, and the next stop on my spiritual journey came when leading an adult religious education class at the Bell County UU Fellowship. 3 of us, that was a large group, but it was a small gathering in total. 3 of us explored the meaning of spirituality weekly for a couple of months. I finally got all the words in my head aligned to my satisfaction and decided that spirituality, for me, is my sense of connection to the world. And the world, for me, includes people, plants, animals, global warming, well-known sociopathic politicians who will not be named, and so much more. Everything. Wow. So I had clearly moved beyond the purely visceral and into my head, and at the same time, I think I united my inner and outer worlds. My newfound understanding of spirituality that I carry with me today, even though it's been 15 years, directs me to embrace every day of my life fully and with an open heart. I started to build my own theology, which I hope will serve as an operating system for the chaos that I inhabit. I'm finding that I can use my new and growing vocabulary of religious language to talk with other people about this bus ride to meaning that I've been on for over 60 years now. So take a minute for yourself, write down, draw a picture, or however you want to represent your current understanding of spirituality. Think of this as being like a stop at Stuckey's if you're my age, or maybe Buc-ee's if you're younger. I don't know about the rhyming of that. Take a potty break, get a snack, and get ready to buckle in for an even wilder ride as we move into social action. So, I hope this is a graceful transition into social action. Sometimes my writing and speaking have the same boundary issues that I do as a person in general. But trust me, there's a transition here. So when I decided to leave academia to begin ministerial formation work, I frequently explained it with the following 3 reasons. I'm 60, if I don't do it now, it won't happen. And this is my chance as a teacher I had this last spring, Betty Jean Reuters Ward told family and friends, this is an opportunity to live into my deepest humanity. And when I think about serving as a chaplain for 3 months in my future as an intern, I think that will really be very true. I can't say it any better than she did, even though I was thinking similar thoughts. The second thing I told people is I was tired of spending all day on computers and would prefer to spend more time meeting with real people face to face. I want to thank COVID for making that dream come true. Not. But last of all, and more relevant here, is that I expected to work for social change the last third of my life. And those who employ me as a minister will be less concerned if I end up in jail after a protest than would be my university president, especially the one I had in my previous job. We won't tackle all of that now. Now we're headed into social action, and I hope that that I won't end up in jail for being a bad tour guide today. As we think about social action, I think there are 2 companion questions that come to mind when I think about it. The first is, what have you done to promote social justice in your life? It is up to us to affirm and promote the goal of a world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. That is the 6th principle of the UUA. So I'd like you to take a minute to reflect on the first effort you made to help create a world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. Maybe, like some of us, you had to free yourself from the discriminatory thinking of the culture in which you were raised. Maybe you participated in civil rights protests. We all get off and on the bus toward world community at different places. So here's a chance to explore your starting point. So I'm trying to balance time and for you to do what you need to do and time to keep things moving. Hopefully you've got something down you like or can either come back to. Second question you might ask yourself or might be asked of you is, what have you done to advance social justice lately? The movement towards a peaceful, free, and just world community never ends and may never even be reached, not once. It is nonetheless the burden we cannot put down. Our principles embedded in our covenant require us to affirm and promote this journey. That is an essential part of UU theology. It's not always easy to be a social activist. Not everyone is ready to dive into social action at every point in their lives. There are jobs to work, children to raise, common diseases to fend off, much less COVID, and uncertainty abounds these days with a president who cares less for his day job than for self-aggrandizement. Yes, and then there's COVID. So how are you set up to engage in social action these days? Please take a minute to think about either or both of the following two questions, and then describe your current social action location on your map. What have you done lately to work for human rights? And/or how can you take action in this time of COVID-19 social inhibition? All of us are needed to give what we can give. Most importantly, what you give must come from your heart and your desire to work for justice, equity, and compassion in human relations as you promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Join the flow of humanity, bending the arc of history toward justice, regardless of the struggles you face, and you will find others will help you carry your load as you help carry theirs. Through our efforts and the efforts of kindred souls around us, the prophecy of Martin Luther King may someday be realized. Black spirituals were shaped in the physical, social, and psychological furnace of slavery. These songs carry forward a legacy of hope, resilience, and survival, which are still needed as the modern world finds new ways to continue old oppressions. We fight for universal freedom and equity. The next musical stop on today's tour will visit a familiar song with a couple of lyrical insertions of particular relevance at this point in U.S. history. So since Pete Seeger is my hero, the way we'll do this is I'm going to sing a traditional version of the first verse once, and then again, and after I've done it once, you should have a sense of the melody and you can sing with me. And then we'll sing the next two verses. And this is a nice, quick little song. But many of you are probably familiar with it, and wherever you feel comfortable, jump right in. Oh, don't you let nobody turn you around. I hope you enjoyed that. I can't resist singing those spirituals. They're just so fun. If we want to cure our heartsick nation, build upon the ideal of freedom for some, and still only half delivered to many, we have to get past our historical failures and our more recent disagreements with each other about how to make justice for all a reality. Those who promote the status quo of social and economic inequality will not yield easily because they're working to create a world in which they have control, and they will not rest. Please take this moment to name the next thing you will do to move us all towards justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. I hope you had time to either express your thoughts or put a point there you can return to and finish the idea. I'm seeing a few more faces. I'm going to wait just a minute because a lot of people are still looking down, I think perhaps writing. So let's take just a few more seconds to do that. And now all aboard for the final trip for today, your relationship with Wildflower Church. Perhaps the most pressing thing we face today in Wildflower Church is healing. Please make a note on your tour map that describes your starting point with Wildflower Church. Maybe it was your first visit. Maybe you didn't feel connected strongly until you had a conversation that really made you feel like you belong. Perhaps there was a service during which you realized that Wildflower was a good place to help you grow into your full potential as a human being. That would be our goal. For some of us. Let's take a minute to draw not only a starting place, but also some of the important stops along the way. So I'm going to allow a little more time than previously so you can reflect on that. So at this moment, I'm going to run off script just slightly and note that after finding some of these images online, I want to reflect on the fact that Wildflower has been a place that has allowed people to work for social change since its inception. And I think that's an important thing to remember as we go forward. And now I'll also make a confession here. This next song, our offertory, I never would have found if I hadn't just become a grandfather for the first time 2 weeks ago on my birthday. That's how good it is. So, but you can take any song, which was really appropriate to that moment, and bend it around to the current purpose if you work at it. So here I go. At Wildflower, we do accept potatoes, but your time, energy, and some financial support will probably make a bigger and more immediate difference. The Little Potato Song is inspired by the arrival of a newborn baby. I hope you'll find new inspiration for your relationship with Wildflower today. If this is your first time with us, please feel free to just enjoy the music. Your presence here is gift enough. The offering will now be given and gratefully received. The details will be on your screen. So, thinking about how we first get involved in churches, I became a member in a UU church because I was not required to believe mainstream religious dogma. I think many people who join the denomination as adults do so for the same reason, and that was perhaps especially true in the early years of the denomination. This is a very individualistic reason for being a UU. I believe this characterized UU churches for most of the 19 years in which I was very active in congregations. Graduate school and my family life pulled me away for 14 years until I returned last August to Wildflower. And I found that I could not become a member by just signing the membership book. And that baffled me a little bit. That always been the process. Our membership requires us to be in covenant with our fellow members. This is a higher bar than was previously required. It requires us to make a more specific commitment to our principles, not just a passive agreement. Well, one might ask, is that worth it? I think Starhawk's comments on community describe the possible benefits of a deeper commitment. She says, somewhere there are people to whom we can speak with passion without having the words catch in our throats. Somewhere a circle of hands will open to receive us. Eyes will light up as we enter. Voices will celebrate with us whenever we come into our own power. Community means strength that joins our strength to do the work that needs to be done. Arms to hold us when we falter. A circle of healing, a circle of friends. Some place where we can be free. Welcome, welcome home. But community like that does not come for free. It requires the work described by Rebecca Parker to create that little slice of heaven on earth. She said, we come to know this world as paradise when our hearts and souls are reborn through the arduous and tender task of living rightly with one another and the earth. Rebecca Parker described this work as a requirement for realizing that paradise could be ours if we could focus our energies on the here and now in a profound embrace of the world, as she called it. I will add that this world comes to us with imperfections, pain, defensiveness, countless barriers to this embrace. As heaven is achieved through supreme efforts to sit with our own pain and anger while engaging fully with those who are equally hurt and angry. This is not easy work, but it can bring rewards if we engage it wholeheartedly. At this time, I invite you to mark the current location on your journey with Wildflower Church. Represent that any way you choose. I hope you had time to represent your thoughts and feelings at some level, and feel free to expand on that at a later time. I think it's important to note that change can shake the foundations of any social institution, thereby disturbing the lives of those who are involved in it. Unitarian Universalism is no exception. Not only have congregations taken a more focused approach to covenanting, but members of marginalized social groups are increasingly coming to UU churches in search of a spiritual home. I've long believed that the premises on which the church was founded make it the quintessential expression of religious freedom in the United States. We've, unfortunately, and those of you who've been watching the political world for the last 40, 50 years, know that we, the people, have been increasingly divided by culture wars, made more intense through the increased presence of media in our lives. Similarly, we UUs are struggling to find the balance between the freedom to believe what each of us thinks is true and committing ourselves to a larger good that welcomes all who come to our faith tradition in sincere pursuit of a spiritual home. That commitment will require us to acknowledge our own journey, complete with joys and sorrows, as well as that of all others in and considering joining our congregation. Just as our country is now facing more fully the racism inherent in its founding documents that underpinned a merciless brand of capitalism built on human exploitation, many longtime members of our denomination are now trying to understand how the notion of white privilege applies to their lives, and perhaps more confusing, how to go forward into a more egalitarian, multicultural world. How do longtime members move from a past completely committed to social justice toward what is needed next? I don't currently own all those words I need to understand where we're headed next. I see my age and habits making me a little uncomfortable as I learn the language of activism that is currently in use now. But I do understand the notion of white privilege really well. While I was able to pursue my path through the dominant social system that seemed to be made just for me, white, male, middle class, child of someone who believed deeply in education. My tennis doubles partner, Johnny Hernandez, and I could not be served at Denny's in Corpus Christi when we were in 8th grade. And I could walk away from that and forget about it in a minute when I wasn't with Johnny, but he could not. And reflecting on this service, I decided to, or I came to reflect on things that I believe. My assumptions about how the world works were different than Johnny's. He understood why we weren't being served, and it took his explanation for me to get it. I know that I earned much of what has come to me in the form of education and work opportunities, and I'm proud of the personal challenges I overcame to do the things I have done. But I'm quite sure that the hurdles I overcame were somewhat lower than those faced by people of color, people of minority sexual identities and orientations, and women of all colors. Our denomination is facing the same growing pains as is our country. The notion of white supremacy culture and the response to that label and all its connotations have created a controversy within the UUA as a whole and our congregation in particular. Our congregation and our denomination are going through the same growing pains as our nation and all levels of as our society attempts to become truly integrated, multicultural, and multi-spiritual in nature. What is at stake is the health of the denomination, congregations across the US, and relationships among the people who make up our congregation. There's no magic pill to ensure the health of any of these. Rather than parse words, let us all acknowledge pain and discomfort if we feel it. Let us all also hear each other out, because pain and discomfort are all around when the change that accompanies the true integration of different social groups takes center stage as it does now. Consider this reflection from Jade Fabello. I hope I said his last name correctly. I've got this secondhand. A young black man from South Austin who now writes for Texas Monthly, and I think does a really eloquent job. He notes that to be black and politically active in Austin is to work among liberal whites who are glad to be educated about racial injustice, but then want to educate you about what degree of change is possible and when. He recalls a story that when I was 18, I was invited to speak at a small gathering of the local elite. I'd won a speech competition on that bright stage the year prior, and since then I had addressed audiences of white Austin liberals with my musings about institutional racism, the brutality, mass incarceration, and discriminatory hiring practices that persist in this country. While at a high rise that showed me a view of my city I had never seen before, I spouted statistics about the number of Black folk killed by police officers every year, as members of the audience swirled their wine. When it was over, a white woman sitting with perfect posture told me that for her, I was a translator, someone capable of explaining racism without seeming too angry. And I smiled the smile I had always smiled. Jay did not accept this role of translator. He concluded that piece by saying, "I'm just a kid, an out-of-work translator who no longer has an interest in the position. I'm ready to say goodbye to an old me, a me that sought white acceptance, that spent my political energy on a system that could not imagine me being alive." I hope to have a conversation with him in the near future so I can meet the new Jay, a person ready to invest his energy in a way that will bring change. And it's easy for me to note that and to experience that openly expressed feelings and desires of oppressed people can challenge members of the dominant culture who are experiencing their own honest sense of loss at the messy, not always well-articulated change going on around us. Understanding each other is a step for each of us to take as we grow into our own greatest humanity. We must reach further to understand how each of us is connected to this messy world around us while trying to find inner peace. Wildflower can be a place for that challenging struggle in both its internal and shared forms. Please describe on your map where you would like your relationship with the church to be at this time next year. You may choose a word or picture that represents a raw feeling or an intimate connection to others. Let your heart be your most trusted tour guide for this last stop on our journey. If you feel marginalized or attacked at Wildflower, can you imagine being able to speak your whole truth and be accepted and supported here 1 year from now? So as we head into our final tour for the day, I'm trying to keep my emotional level here under control. I want to say that what we have to gain at Wildflower is vast. We have the community that Starhawk describes as a circle of healing, a circle of friends. You may have at times experienced that circle of healing when at Wildflower, either physically or maybe just held in your memories. We have the resources to get there. We have hopes, fears, and stories about life to share. We have ears to listen, eyes to see and cry, hearts to break and mend. We are humans, and we have the arduous and tender task of living rightly with one another to do. Please join me in singing All My Life's a Circle, written by Harry Chapin. Like I did before, I'll sing the chorus twice, which is what appears on your screen first. First time so you can pick up the melody, and then we'll all go together. And we'll proceed from there. And I've got a backup singer because my emotional ties to this song are pretty deep. And I struggled when I tried to get through it in practice. So got Elkie back there to back me up if things fall apart. So I'll do the chorus that you see on your screen now twice. And then first time to give you the melody, and then we'll go together. All my life's a circle, years keep rolling by. May we all go round one more time and perchance find each other and ourselves again. Blessed be.